Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going to be taking a look at WOLFBLADE, written by William King. Now, William King started writing for Game Workshops in 1989, where he wrote a lot of the Warhammer 40k backstories in their magazine, White Dwarf, where he wrote a lot of short stories. The Mac Orion Crusade trilogy, and the first 4 stories of the Space Wolf series. The first 3 being Space Wolves, Ragnar's Claw, and Grey Hunter, which I'm pretty sure are in the omnibus, but which is starting to become an annoying trend. I'm not reviewing those first books. I'm starting with number 4. And this book focuses on a hero of the Space Wolves called Ragnar Blackclaw. In fact, you can read his backstory here inside the Space Wolf Codex, if you have it. But not only can you find out about his backstory in the Codex, you could also see all the special rules that pertain to him, such as Insane Bravado, which gives him and his allies a good bonus when they charge into combat, and War Howl, which is essentially an area effect buff for his allies. Not to mention, he has the Mary Sue. Wait. Okay, technically Mary Sue isn't written in the Codex, but it might as well be. For the way he's written in this book, I think that is his greatest ability. But as I mentioned in previous books, being a Mary Sue doesn't really make it a bad story. You could have likable Mary Sues. So, does Ragnar become a likable Mary Sue? Well, let's just talk about the story and you can decide for yourself. After the events of the Space Wolves Omnibus, it turns out Ragnar has lost a sacred artifact to the Space Wolves by throwing it and stabbing the enemy with it. And while different elements of the Space Wolf chapters have different feelings about what he did, because although he did lose the sacred artifact, he did use it to stab a demonic Primarch in the eye with it. So while some call him a hero, others think he should be shamed for what he did. So Ragnar is assigned to a duty which is kind of a mixed honor and punishment at the same time. He's assigned to a group called the WOLFBLADE. Now, what are the WOLFBLADE exactly? Well, you see, if you know much about the Warhammer 40k universe, you know that in order for them to travel through space, they need what's called a navigator. Navigators are psychics with that third eye in their forehead. And these navigators belong to very noble, rich houses back on Terra. And the Space Wolves have a deal with one of these houses, in which the house will provide navigators so the Space Wolf fleets could travel through space. And in return, the Space Wolves will assign an honor guard called the WOLFBLADEs to protect them. And like I said, while some will see this as the honor, other people believe this is just a way of the chapter trying to get rid of Ragnar and sticking him on Terra so he can't mess with the chapter anymore. And while Ragnar is part of the WOLFBLADE, he's essentially on a constant watch to protect this house, but not from any obvious threats. Like, there is no alien invasion attacking this house. There aren't enemies drawing up a battle line for them to fight out on the field. But instead, it is a lot of political sabotage, a lot of behind the screen work, having to deal with a lot of cloak and dagger stuff that you wouldn't really normally see Space Marine, especially Space Wolf, have to deal with. And that's pretty much the main premise of the book. Now, how does the story play out? Well, the book is essentially a flashback to back in the days where Ragnar was a Bloodclaw and these things have happened. The book actually starts with Ragnar already being a great lord of a company, which is the equivalent to a Space Marine captain. And the setup right there is pretty short, but the only main reason we have that, because what this book tries to do is that it tries to teach you a lesson. That's right, the Space Wolf books are trying to teach you a lesson. And they use Ragnar's story to show you how he learned from the events of the past to grow in the future. But I'm not going to really go into that, because really there's not much more to say on it. So let's just talk about the entire flashback story. When Ragnar is assigned to the WOLFBLADE, he learns that the WOLFBLADE protect a particular house, House Belisarius. I'm pretty sure I get that right. But not just the house, but a particular member of that house, a navigator called Lady Gabriella. And she's just as shrewd and political and secretive as any other navigator, or any other person in any of the houses you're going to read in this book. And for a decent part of the book, it's kind of hard to tell if she's just trying to use Ragnar and the rest of the WOLFBLADE for her own specific political means, or if she really doesn't have a hidden agenda and just needs to be protected. And when Ragnar reaches Terra, he meets several other members of the WOLFBLADE. 2 in particular, Torn, who's probably the only clean-cut Space Wolf you ever see, and Hager. And I don't care if I said that wrong, that's the way I'm going to pronounce it from now on. Who is, at this point in the book, the largest and, well, let's not dance around the subject, fattest Space Marine you're ever going to see, or read about. And these characters are fairly stock characters. Torn is the character that's going to provide the intellect and insight and overall logic in any kind of plan or situation to get into. While Hager is much closer to the comic relief, big brute, always thinks with his muscle kind of character. And Ragnar displays a rookie trying to adapt to the situation. And this is with these 3 characters that you gotta decide if this is going to be a book for you or not. or the rest of the series for that matter, because it's going to focus mainly on these three guys. They are incredibly stopped. I mean, you see these kind of characters in any type of movie or book, or television show, or any form of media for that matter. And if you're the kind of person that gets annoyed with those kind of things in stories, it's really going to annoy you in this book, because they don't really innovate off that idea much. But if you're the opposite person and it doesn't really bug you that much, or you could at least put it aside for a while, the characters do play off pretty well off of each other, with Hagar and Torrin being complete polar opposites. And they're always fighting and bantering with each other, but you can tell that they're still really close. It's a kind of friendship that you hate to love. Now, knowing that, as we're following these characters, Ragnar's just really trying to get a grasp of how things work on Terra, how things work in these noble houses. Because this is just a completely different world to him. But what a lot of people in the houses are doing is that they're constantly underestimating these guys. Because Space Wolves are viewed as barbarians, but there's still a lot of cunning in there. And Ragnar and company are caught in this conspiracy, because there is a rival house to Belisarius, which is House Pharassus. I'm not even going to try to repronounce that. And they're caught up with a pretty involved plan that essentially involves a revolution of the peasants and assassination of the high nobles of the House Belisarius. And while I think this plot could be really interesting and intense, there is one fatal flaw with this. And that flaw is, which can also be considered a strength to the book, is Ragnar Blackmane himself. Now, earlier in this review, I already mentioned that he is a major Mary Sue character. Because of course Ragnar is a hero, but he is constantly put into situations in which he would miraculously survive, and to see when the odds are clearly against him, and events just kinda happen to work out in his advantage. Just because. But with all that said, the character is still a capable character. There are some events in which he seems a bit heroic, and you do kind of root for him, but there are just times where things just shouldn't go the way it does. And you just gotta accept the fact that that's the way the book is written. Now for me, that didn't necessarily make it a bad read. I still enjoyed the book. But just going through it and having to deal with these events, I just felt that it could have been done better. It could have been a great book, but it just turned out for me to be an okay book. And that's it for WOLFBLADE for now. Next time I'm going to review in Sons of Fenris. Till then, those are my opinions. Take it for what they're worth.